This is the Somerset village of Puriton, on the River Parrett, about 2 miles from Bridgwater. The Somerset levels meet the western end of the Polden Ridge here, which runs 10 miles eastwards, carrying its Roman road to Street. When my wife first came to be vicar of the parish, she was surprised by a chance remark someone made. "You do know Jesus walked through the village?" Could it be true? There are many legends about him visiting Cornwall and Somerset in the years between ages 12 and 30, when the Bible is silent as to his whereabouts, but Puriton never seems to be mentioned. The legends seem to centre on Glastonbury, which was given the title Domus Dei, or Home of God, in the Doomsday Book, and Priddy in the Mendips. Yet the church booklet does say an attractive legend attached to Puriton is that the nearest pilgrim route to Glastonbury for overseas and West Country pilgrims from Devon and Cornwall and Wales was by the Parrett, Puriton and Down End. This pilgrim's walk, said to have been an old Roman road and one taken by St. Joseph of Arimathea on his journey to Glaston. Joseph, according to the legends, was a metal trader in tin from Cornwall and lead from the Mendips. The Jewish Talmud says he was Jesus' great-uncle, being the uncle of Mary, his mother, so could have brought the teenage Jesus with him, possibly working for him. The window at the east end of the church shows Joseph, depicted as an old man kneeling at an altar, on which there seems to be a Jewish scroll. Behind him, through a window, is a pointed hill, which seems to be Glastonbury Tor without the tower, a tree, possibly the holy thorn, and a grave, because of the tradition that Joseph was buried at Glastonbury. Could Puriton have been their landing place when coming to the Mendips? It seems to have been a much more substantial settlement than today, and could even be the lost Roman town of Uxella, mentioned in the Ravenna Cosmography, a list of settlements in the empire, as being somewhere in Somerset, which has never been located. The route to the Mendips would not have been direct, but would use the Polden Ridge as a natural causeway to cross the marshy Somerset levels, then going north along the Fosse Way to Beacon Hill near Shepton Mallet, then taking the Mendip Road to the mining settlements at Priddy and Charterhouse. An article from 1885 by W. M. Arthur Jones, part of the annual publication of the Somerset Archaeology and Natural History Society for that year, confirms with this map showing the Roman roads in the area that Uxella Aestuarium refers to the estuary of the Parrett. It goes further to suggest that a Celtic name, Puriton, with the Welsh double D, mentioned in early Welsh writing, may be the origin of the river's name, and also of the town of Puriton, called Peritone in the Doomsday Book. As well as this, it shows that a Welsh name for the Severn, Havran, also means summer, and could be the origin of the name of Somerset as the Summerland. One of the legends of Jesus in Britain says that he came to a ship of Tarshish to the Summerland, and sojourned in a place called Paradise. This map shows, as well as the Polden Roman road, another coming south towards the neighbouring village of Pollet. This suggests that Uxella may have been large enough to extend as far as Pollet. The article reads, Uxella is the Latin form of the old British name by which the estuary of the Parrett was called, and which occurs in the old geographers, has disappeared, and has left no representative in the language of the people. The term would seem to have been applied to the landlocked estuary covering the Bridgwater levels, and is evidently derived from the British Wisk Heli, implying free access to the seawater, Heli. Ad Uxellum was a Roman station lying on the shore of this estuary. It's usually been supposed to have occupied the site of the present town of Bridgwater, but the extensive Roman remains found by Mr. Stradling about the Polden Hills would lead us rather to look for it on the other side of the river. Foundations of buildings found in the 1970s during construction of the M5 suggest a substantial port, which, with its communication via the Polden Ridge, could have been favoured by Joseph of Arimathea in approaching the Mendips. Many of the finds are now displayed in the Blake Museum, Bridgwater, whose description of the site indicates that it seems to represent part of a substantial settlement. The oldest part of the present St Michael's Church at Puriton is the tower, which is 13th century, but there must have been an earlier church here, as in the Domesday Book it's written that the Church of the Blessed Apostle St Peter in Rome holds of the king Puriton. Queen Edith held it in the time of King Edward. It has been suggested that the manor and church of Puriton were bestowed on the Pope by William the Conqueror as a thank offering for his blessing on William's enterprise. It didn't stay with him for long, but it was seemingly the only place given in this way, and the question arises as to why an obscure church in Somerset, far from his capital, should have been chosen for this honour. Could it be that whispers of a distinguished visitor were known about at the time? King Einar was king of the Saxon kingdom of Wessex from 688 to 726 AD, and is known for the code of laws he established, which Alfred the Great later built on, and for founding many religious foundations, particularly the Minster Church, which later became Wells Cathedral, and refounding Glastonbury Abbey. He seemed particularly attached to the area of West Somerset, which included Glastonbury, Wells and Puriton, and from one of his charters, although it's not certain that it's genuine, would seem to have known of the tradition of Jesus' visit. These are extracts from it. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, I, Einar, supported in my royal dignity by God, with the advice of my Queen Sexburga, to the ancient church situate in the place called Glastonbury, which church the great high priest and chiefest minister, formerly through his own ministry and that of angels, sanctified by many and unheard of miracles to himself and the eternal Virgin Mary, as was formerly revealed to Saint David, do grant out of these places, for the sustenance of the monastic institution and the use of the monks, Brent, Soe, Pilton, Dalting and Bleeden. To the piety and affectionate entreaty of these people, I assent and I guard, by the security of my royal grant, against the designs of malignant men and snarling curs, as it is the first place in the kingdom of Britain, and the source and foundation of all religion, no church may obtain surpassing dignity and privilege. There is also the possibility that Einar may have lived at Puriton at some time, as mentioned in the story of the murder of Indactrus. Saint Indactrus was a son of a king of Hibernia, and in company with his sister Drusa went to Rome on pilgrimage and returned thence to Britain, landing at a port named Tamarunta. Arriving at Glastonbury, he desired to go and pray at St Patrick's tomb. At that time King Einar, king of the West Saxons, was living in a ville called Pedret, Villa Nomine Pedret, which may be the Domesday Puriton or Puriton, or perhaps North or South Petherton. His followers were living in little settlements round him, alluding no doubt to the first Saxon settlements in the Poldens. Among these was a certain Hona, who, tempted by the wealth he thought Indactrus had with him, murdered him and his sister, Saint Dominica, and his followers, throwing them down a well. They were described as sleeping at Shapwick, on the Glastonbury moors. There is also slight evidence that memory of a tradition of a special significance of Puriton may have lingered on in royal circles, for King Edward III was 3 times patron of the church, followed by Richard II. Edward is known for his interest in legends, as he was the builder of the Round Table building at Windsor Castle, excavated by Time Team. He founded an Arthurian order, which became the Order of the Garter. Puriton still has some royal association, as its patrons are the Dean and Chapter of St George's, Windsor Castle, though it shares this honour with a number of other churches around the country. The first church here was built in the time of Edward the Confessor, but the parish council site said it's believed to be on the site of a Roman shrine. The reason for this belief is not certain.
Nothing remains of this church. The oldest part of the present building is the 13th century tower. It's possible the original could have been destroyed in a Viking raid, as they did come up the Parrot. But it was certainly a populated area in Roman times. A Roman settlement was found on Puriton Hill when the M5 link road was being built, and there were villas on the end of the Poldens. Flints found on the motorway building suggest that Puriton may have been continuously occupied since near Mesolithic times. It was an estuary port in Roman times when the Parrot took a different course. There is a door inside the porch leading to a stairway which led to a now disappeared upper level, which may have been used by the choir at Palm Sunday processions. The singing would emerge from these angel holes, as with the ones at Wells Cathedral. Puriton Church is a lay centre, with one lay running from the church in the adjoining village of Pollet along this path through the churchyard. The centre is at the tower. The Norman church of St John the Baptist, Pollet, replaced an earlier Saxon structure, and the church is thought to have been a popular station on medieval pilgrimages from Watchet to Glastonbury. The lay runs westward from these churches along the ridge until it comes to a site called Swain's Jumps near the road. This is rather an enigmatic structure, a line of 4 tiny stones, milestone shaped but too small for that purpose. According to the legend, described in Somerset Legends by Berta Lawrence, during the Civil War there was a man called Jan Swain who lived in Moorlinch. Found to be a rebel, he was dragged from his bed to be taken to Bridgewater, where he was to be hanged. Somehow he persuaded the troopers who came for him to untie him to show his crying children a last entertainment of how far he could leap. He took 3 immense leaps, a hop, skip and a jump, which took him into the impenetrable and swampy Loxley Woods, where he could hide safely. This is the point where this lay meets one of the diagonals through Wells Cathedral, the one which also passes through St Cuthbert's and St Thomas's churches. Strangely, the Swain's Jump stones are arranged across the cathedral lay and seemingly mark its width, which is about 20 paces. Moorlinch Church nearby is also on the cathedral lay, and this was doused strongly there. The next point on the Puriton Pollet line is Pedwell Hill, a lay centre with a prominent clump. A Romano-British site was discovered on the hill, which may have been a shrine. There is also a small church in Pedwell on the line. This was found to be now part of a private house, though the church structure has been retained. There also seems to be a second lay running along the ridge at a small angle to the first one, and meeting it at the lay centre at Swain's Jumps. This goes through the motorway intersection at Puriton, then through a crossroads on Puriton Hill, which must be close to the Roman settlement found there. It then runs closely parallel to the stretch of Roman road along Cock Hill, the summit of the hill at Ryton's grave, the Swain's Jumps centre, closely mean following a long stretch of road along Walton Hill, the Hood Monument near Compton Dundon, and a crossroads on the Foss Way, near Cainton Mandeville. This is probably where the Ridgeway would have met the Foss Way, or its predecessor before the Romans came, to get across to the mining areas rather than going down to Ilchester, which it may have done later. The Iron Age hill fort of Brent Knoll rises spectacularly from the Somerset levels, and the villages of Brent Knoll and East Brent cling to its lower slopes. At 449 feet high, the view over a large part of the county is spectacular, and the hill is visible for many miles around. The Polden Hills to the south, Glastonbury Tor to the east, and the Mendip Hills and Cheddar Gorge to the northeast, and Bristol Channel and Wales to the west end, and the
and the Quantock Hills to the southwest are all visible from the summit. It's been inhabited since the Bronze Age, and its later Iron Age double ramparts were later used by the Romans. It was known then as the Mount of Frogs, Mons Runarum, and Roman coins of the Emperor Trajan, AD 98 to 117, and Septimus Severus, 145 to 211, have been found on the knoll. It stands as an outcrop of the Mendip Hills. It has Arthurian associations too, the legend being that as the Mount of Frogs it was guarded by 3 giants. One of Arthur's knights, Ida, son of Neith, had to quest to the mount and slay all the giants single-handed, and so prove his virtue as a knight. Unfortunately he perished in the attempt. Arthur, remorseful that he had sent the young knight to his death, gave Brent Marsh to the monks of Glastonbury so that they could pray for Ida's soul. The hill is also one of the contenders for Mount Barden, the site of one of Arthur's knights against the Saxons, and there is a hamlet called Battleborough adjacent to it, though this may refer to a battle in AD 875 when the Saxons drove away the Vikings. The land was given to Glastonbury Abbey by the Saxon King Einar. There seem to be 3 leys forming a triangle at Brent Knoll, one of them going through the Leys centre at Puriton Church. Coming across the King's Sedgemoor Drain, the line goes over Puriton Hill, the site of the old port where the river ran against the hill, and where Roman buildings, interpreted as warehouses, were found when the approach road for the M25 was being built in the 1970s. From Puriton Hill one can see the course of the drain, which is approximately where the river was, though it was very much wider. Also a field boundary which seems to follow the line of the ley can be seen stretching away in the direction of Bridgewater. From the other side of the hill, Brent Knoll can be seen in the distance. The ley then goes through the main multi-junction of the village, where Riverton Road meets the road called Rye, where the church and vicarage are. This name Rye has been interpreted in a book on the levels as meaning humpy ground. It then runs along Rye to the junction with Batch Road, where there is a small green, which I realised was built up higher than the road and higher than the house garden behind it. Could this have originally been an ancient mound? The line certainly goes through it, skirting the edge of the churchyard, and is about 16 paces wide. Rye bends to the right at the junction with Batch Road, and the straight stretch beyond is coincident with one of the leys passing through the church tower. This is the one going through Cannington Church, the Motte and Bailey at Down End, 2 crossroads near Mudgley, Ebor Gorge, and 2 tumuli on the Mendips. This line is about 13 paces wide. St Mary's Church, Cannington, built on the site of a Saxon church mentioned in Domesday Book. This was given to Cannington Priory in 1138. There was never a monastic church, but served the people of Cannington as a parish church. The oldest part of the present church is the West Tower, built in the 14th century. Down End Castle was built at Down End, north of Dunball. The castle has a Motte and Bailey design and may have exploited an existing Viking site. The castle was once fed water by a natural spring at the base of the motte. It may have been built about 1100, after the surrounding region of Somerset had become stable in the years following the Norman invasion of England. The de Columbers were probably responsible for building the castle. They were lords of the manor of Puriton in the late 12th century. After the creation of Bridgewater town and castle, however, Down End began to face fierce competition as a port. Bridgewater eventually became dominant and Down End went into decline. Ebor Gorge is a limestone gorge in Somerset, cut mostly into the Clifton Down limestone by water. The site was occupied in the Neolithic era, and their tools and flint arrowheads have been discovered, along with pottery from the Bronze Age.
The Brent Knoll lay continues from Puriton to cross the levels by the Huntspills, and after crossing the Huntspill River, which is an artificial cut, not really a river, goes through Withy Grove Farm, coincident with its track. Here it crosses a lay going to St John's Church, the Abbey and Chalice Well at Glastonbury, and there seems to be a possible small crop mark feature visible in the aerial picture on Google Earth. A little further on it goes through another farm, New Road Farm, where it crosses the west running lay that runs along the nave of Wells Cathedral, and goes on to go through the important prehistoric site and Roman road junction of Beacon Hill, Shepton Mallet. From here it goes to run along one of the ramparts of Brent Knoll, and then goes to East Brent Church and a short piece of coincident track, going on to another Somerset viewpoint, Bleeden Hill. Although no ancient site is marked on the map here, in 1870–72, John Marius Wilson's Imperial Gazetteer of England and Wales mentions that remains of an ancient British camp are on Bleeden Hill, and bones, coins and armour have been found. Then the lay goes on to Locking Castle, a modern Bailey site now part of a golf course. It was on Carberry Hill. Excavations in 1902 identified the remains of a small stone chamber surrounded by a ditch. Fragments of pottery and the remains of a sword were also found. The second lay at Brent Knoll runs along a coincident stretch of road at Holwell Combe, a crossroads at Four Forks and Charlinch Church. The Church of St Mary at Charlinch has now been deconsecrated. It dates from the 11th century, with a tower probably of 1867. The church contains monuments and tablets to the family of Admiral Robert Blake, but since 1986 it has been converted into a private residence. The lay then passes through a multi-junction at Loxton and mainly 15th century Banwell Church. Then it skirts the edge of Cadbury Hillfort near Congresbury, not to be confused with the one at South Cadbury. The remains of Iron Age roundhouses may still be seen inside, and there was also evidence of rectangular buildings. The hill fort was refortified around 400, and imported pottery has been found. It could have been the monastery of St Congar, after whom Congresbury was named. To the north of the hill, in Henley Wood, a Roman temple was built, which seems to have been on the lay. After it fell into ruin in the 5th century, local people who'd presumably been converted to Christianity were buried at the site over earlier pagan graves. This could be evidence that it was later the site of the monastery. Excavations on the site prior to its destruction for a land quarry revealed finds including a 20mm bronze pre-Roman figurine of a nude female with a plaited band and collar around her neck. The third lay goes through the Church of St Michael at Brent Knoll, which dates from the 11th century. There's a Norman doorway, however the rest of the church dates from around 1290. The north aisle was built in the late 15th century. The church is best known for its unusual carvings on some of its pew ends, and in particular the three that make up an allegorical cartoon thought to depict an avaricious abbot of Glastonbury in the guise of a fox. From here it goes to the stone on Brent Knoll summit, commemorating the Jubilee of Queen Victoria, evidently subconsciously sighted. Also possibly subconsciously sighted is the 1908 church of St Hugh at Charterhouse, then the Roman fort adjacent to it. Finally the lay reaches the 12th century St Michael's Church at Compton Martin. These three lays form a triangle round the summit of Brent Knoll.